Welcome to the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. I'm Kiran Kumar, founder and host of You're Not Invisible After 50. Despite the title, you don't have to be over 50 to listen to this podcast. No matter whether you're 25, 45, or 65, we can all learn lessons from each other to help us build a better, more fulfilled life. Come listen to the inspiring stories of all the phenomenal women over 50 who are kicking ass and making an impact. They are not invisible. I'm not invisible, and neither are you. So, no matter what society says, life doesn't end at 50. In fact, it's just beginning. Welcome to the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. I'm Kiran and host of this podcast. We're all about showcasing phenomenal women over 50 who are kicking ass and making an impact. You'll get to hear all their inspiring stories why you don't have to be invisible after 50. So sit back and enjoy the wonderful life story from this week's guest. My guest today is Deena Kordt. Hi, Deena.
Hi, Kieran.
Well, thank you for choosing to come on to the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. I'm so excited about this. So let's get moving. I'm going to get you to introduce yourself to our listeners in one line or more before we move into the body of the podcast. So wherever you want to start.
Thank you, Kieran. I appreciate the invitation to be here. I am a Canadian. I'm Deena Kordt. I am a publisher and an author, a blogger, and a women's empowerment coach. And I really have a deep mission to bring more awareness to domestic abuse. And that is one of my biggest missions right now.
We're going to get into that, into this when we actually move into the body of this podcast. And I am really interested and excited about doing this with you. So let's begin with the past, wherever you want to start.
Well, my childhood was in a very small rural community. I actually grew up on a ranch and an environment of a strict religious upbringing as well. I was the oldest of four children. I had three younger brothers. So there's a few factors right away that you can identify sets a tone for what my childhood was like. I struggled to manage a very a curious spirit, a very excited and wanting to learn more. And yet, yes, I was fortunate to be in an environment, as many rural kids can relate to. You learn a lot of practical skills, but you don't have a lot of social engagement. You don't really learn as much about people's personalities and that dynamic of being around a lot of social uh, situations. And so I found that I wasn't that well adjusted that way. And as I was also in a very strict religious environment, there wasn't a lot of, the partying scene or seeing people in different environments other than school. So when it gets to the dating ages, pretty naive, pretty trusting, and that just led to not being aware of some red flags that others probably would have learned, through those years. And that then led me into, I went right from that. I went to school just before I went to the city and took some nurses training. I started dating someone who, it was over a few years before we actually got married. But I feel like that also contributed to not a lot of exposure to this person in a way that I could, really notice some things that didn't add up. And I just thought maybe was normal. And then entering into a marriage where it's this religious value system of you stick with it, divorce is not encouraged, it's frowned upon. Plus the era that I was growing up in, a small rural community, that all contributes to, you make your bed, you sleep in it. Like this is what you chose and you make it work. And I had a really strong, still do, a very strong, optimistic outlook on life and a spirit of I can make this work. I can put up with whatever. I'm sure if I just try hard enough, then I can turn this around. And ever the optimist, try again, which inadvertently would trigger a very negative reaction. And this just went on and on for years. And I could put up a very solid front to people on the outside. I seemed very confident. And part of that was a survival mechanism as well, because if you showed a weakness or a chink in your armor, is how I literally felt, then that would be attacked. And that was an opening for, some type of abusive responses or treatment. And we had 2 children, a son and a daughter. And I have looked back as I've learned more about the situation I was in and spoken to them about that and said, I feel badly for the environment that I also contributed to, because I would squelch their excitement or their reactions to things or their questions in order to keep the peace, in order not to trigger the abuse. And that's not fair. They're children. They should be able to be as exuberant and loud or goofy or whatever, and not be under that tense environment.
I was just going to say, Deena, I can resonate with some of that because I came from I come from an Indian traditional family. We don't divorce. What would people say? So I can resonate with that. I can also resonates with me where about the children, because where do you go? You can't leave, and that impacts the children. And I feel equally guilty at times of what I may have put them through by staying in the relationship. So I totally understand what you're saying. So please carry on.
I love how you've framed that, because that's really what it is. You're heaping even more guilt, and looking back, you add more guilt to that, and shame, and you don't know if you're doing them more harm by staying or going. And I left my nursing career to be a stay-at-home full-time mom. It was the most beautiful opportunity. I have zero regrets around that. And you question whether you're better to leave that environment. But again, there wasn't financial abuse, but I did feel it honestly wasn't an option for me at that point. It didn't really cross my mind. I kept thinking, let's make it work. I can make it work. I can just try harder. And just somehow this has to remain in place. And I look back now and I realize how alone I was in that. And why I'm speaking out more is so that others don't feel they're alone, and that they realize so many of us have been there and we really do care, and we want to help. And I wish there'd been more of that for me sooner. And I eventually did meet people who were in a place they were ready to share their experience, and things started to click. I started to understand that what I was in wasn't healthy or safe. And I think the person that gave the most weight to this was a professional that I finally did start seeing. And it was not even in relation to this abuse. But I know that the universe, God, source, whoever sent this to cross my path. It was at a time I had lost 2 brothers. They were young adults in separate vehicle accidents. What had happened is I really hadn't processed that grief. And 9 years after the second brother had passed, I happened to be going through some photos from a family member who had passed as an elderly person, and came across pictures of one of the accidents. And I had never seen these. I had no desire to have ever seen them. But when I saw them, it was the most brutal punch to the gut. I literally felt it that hard in my body. I couldn't breathe. It knocked the breath out of me. I came up from the basement where I'd been sorting these photos and was desperately trying to get air back in my lungs. And it was terrifying. And I had no idea why it hit me that hard after that amount of time. And it was very scary. And I realized, I need to see a professional to work through this grief. And one of the first things that she identified was why? Why had I not had that time and space after that many years to process this and work through it? And we uncovered by discussing what type of environment I was living in that it couldn't foster that type of healing, because it was more important to be in this survival mode. And that is where I had to admit and acknowledge that no matter what I did or how long I stayed, this wasn't going to change. Now, it still took years after that for me to actually leave, because I still felt that the power was in the abuser's hands. And there was a significant event that happened years later, probably about 4 or 5 years later, that really felt to me like a power shift. And it took another very brave friend of mine to help me see that. And then and it was at this time I basically manifested. I know I manifest. I'm huge on mindset of manifesting. And I realize now that we always do. We always are manifesting, but with intention. And it was one of the first times I really did it with intention. And I thought, okay, I'm turning 50. So it's either live with this or make a change. But I still didn't know how. And within a couple months of making that bold statement to myself, this power switch happened. And I knew, okay, this is it. This is a sign. This is the time. And that was so pivotal. And it just happened to be at the age of 50. And I think a lot of women face that. It might be 40 for some, 60 for others.
I think that's really true. And for me, there's so much there that is so strikingly similar. I mean, I left my husband after 25 years, and I was at the age of 52. So it was around like the 50 mark. And it was this realization that came a little bit before then, but I didn't actually leave until I was 52. And I think very similar, and it kind of just resonates so deeply with me, because as you're telling your story, I can see it, I can feel it, I can think I've been there too. And I know, because I was financially abused, other abuse as well, so I won't talk too much about that. But the fact is, it was there and it was similar. But at the age of 52, you kind of have a wake-up call and go, I ain't gonna stick this for much longer, and I have to go now, or I'll probably die and wither. So there is a time where you kind of just decide that the time is right.
Yes, we do have a lot in common. I had been with him for 33 years and married for 30, and you think that's most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that guilt and shame comes from, how did I let it last so long? Why did I stay so long? Was it really abuse? And there's that trap that we get caught in of comparisonitis, where, well, I've heard of these extreme cases. Mine isn't that bad, or it wasn't physical, although the threat was there. And we stay stuck. And so many women realize later how, when they get out, they actually start to realize how unsafe they were feeling and how threatened they felt. And what is quite shocking, and part of why I try and bring more awareness to the non-physical abuse, is very frequently when it becomes physical, there has been other abuse present. And sometimes that first physical is near fatal or fatal. And ignoring the non-physical does not mean you're safe. So
Absolutely.
that is a really powerful message. I think I want to come out of that. So, then I struggled to reinvent myself, and my children were adults. I've told this story, on other interviews in my own podcast, that my daughter was married and expecting her first child at that time. So her maternal hormones were rampant. And I was now acting in kind of a risky, trying to experiment and I had never had that freedom coming from that type of childhood, then into an abusive marriage. And suddenly I'm an adult with no dependence and feeling like life is half gone at least, or, or more.
Mhm.
And now what? Who am I? What do I love? What do I want to try? The world is my oyster. Let's try all the things. So in her wisdom and maturity, she requested something I didn't even realize existed, was that we attend mediation together. We'd had a close relationship. Let's save this. Let's figure this out, because those roles were getting a little gray and tempting to flip. And I didn't want that. And what it's done is it has forced us to look at how we process and react, and what our relationships are with each other, and what we're willing to accept or just overlook and allow for the person to make their own choices. And I think that's really a very important growth to not ignore, not to skip over. And the other thing about you and I having left after our children were adults, not only we're dealing with, we can guilt ourselves with so many things. Either we guilt ourselves we didn't leave sooner, or we guilt ourselves that we, put them through that for so long. But we also congratulate ourselves for sticking it out until the kids are gone. That's why a lot of people will stay that long. So we got through it. We congratulate ourselves in that way, but then it's, we counter that by guilting ourselves that we did make them spend their entire
But it's
childhood through that.
really important not to always look backwards. It's important to look
Mm-hmm.
forwards and to move forwards. And the past is the past, and the past should stay as a past, really. So in terms of like, how did you move on, and how did you get into the work that you got into? How did that come about?
It wasn't a clear path. And I absolutely love your point about not being stuck in the past, because that is my empowerment coaching. And that is my focus now, to try and help others. It's important to understand that existed, so we can relate on that basis and open those conversations. I understand you. I care. You aren't alone. This is why, because we have this common background, but let's not get stuck there. Let's use that to propel us forward. And that is what has really brought me to the work I'm in. I have tried many different ventures and creative processes and little entrepreneurial ships. And where I am right now is something that I just needed to trust my instincts on. And it's quite recent that the stars have aligned, the right connections showed up and crossed my path, that I am now the owner and publisher of a magazine. And the magazine is called Divorce Magazine Canada. So it seems like it's a very small niche, and yet at least half of the population is dealing with this personally, if it's a first marriage, and even a higher percentage if it's consecutive marriages. And that doesn't even, the stats, at least that's for Canada, that those stats don't even include common law relationships that are breaking down, like separations that are happening as well. So it's a very high percentage of people dealing with it, or their family or loved ones are, or their clients are. So there's a lot of people this can help. And what it is a resource of who's out there that can help you, why it's important to them to help you. There's education pieces. There's a huge component, a lot of other components than just the physical magazine. So there is some online support groups. There's a brand new podcast. There's a blog. There's a symposium that's coming in the fall, and a YouTube channel, the website, and all these different ways that I hope people are able to find this support and know that they aren't alone. And if they bump up against something they weren't expecting, or they're intimidated to even start the process, at least they can be more informed and supported, and it takes away some of that stress and concern. The interesting thing is that this platform has been an opportunity to open conversations that naturally lead the way our conversation has led when we've spoken, into how many have experienced or are experiencing abuse, and to offer that space and open those conversations. So it's not only the awareness building for the people who are in it to acknowledge and accept, yes, I need to get out, but also to help create compassion and understanding and acceptance for the net and the village that is ready to help and support them, so that they don't just go back like so many do repeatedly, because they're faced with, no support or very little support, or doubt and criticism. And now, not only to build that awareness, but also to have the resources that I'm meeting and networking and offering and saying, okay, this is happening, but there are people here that can help you with all the different aspects. So that's really the beauty of part of what I'm doing.
I think it's really important, Deena, of the work that you are doing, because, there isn't, when you're in that situation, you can't see beyond where you are, and you can't always get the help that you need, or you can't see the light. And what I found, there wasn't anything for me, but got through it. So hence what you're delivering is so needed. It's so necessary for people who are, and as you said, the stats are so high, right? And the information needs to be there, resources need to be there, support needs to be there, understanding needs to be there, and that's what you're providing, and it's necessary and important.
I agree, Kieran. There's just such a need. And one of the biggest reasons that I jumped on board with this is that all these resources are free to the public. The people who are there to help them are generously supporting these platforms so that it's available and there's no barrier to access to this information. And I think that's just fantastic. Yes, the services, if they do engage those services, that's at a cost, but at least they go in more informed. They can informally meet people through either the meetings and resource groups and symposiums, the podcast interviews. They get to informally meet them. There's often free consults, and they feel more confident to invest in what they in the actual services that are going to help them where they are. So I think that's really important. The other venture that is very close to my heart, that's more with the abuse, is the gathering of stories of women who have experienced abuse. Those voices are so important to help others. I can tell my story, but it's going to just resonate with certain people. And there's many other voices and many other experiences out there that need to be shared so that others can relate to that and know they aren't alone. So with some anthologies, there's, a cost involved. And with this, I want no barrier to people to be able to share that, so they can do it anonymously at no cost. And they don't have to be a professional writer. I have transcriptionists if they even want to record, tell their story, and have someone help them get it typed. And all the proceeds from the sales of that book will go to the organizations that do help support people in these situations. So it's a really exciting project that I'm looking forward to getting out to the world. It's very heavy topic. It will be a tough read, but I think it's important also for those who are wanting to understand a family member or a loved one or a friend who has been through that. And maybe they're having a tough time articulating what they've experienced, and for them to come across something like this and really see the stories of these women. I think the compassion will build, and there'll be a better culture for people to understand and hopefully reduce the occurrences of this, because it's escalated even more with the pandemic. Mental health issues have become its own pandemic, which can greatly contribute to abuse. So, and then you add the isolation and that factors in. So, this is very important. I just feel it's such important work. It's not that it's easy, it's not fun, but it's so needed.
I think it's so important that people tell their stories, because when you tell your story, it will resonate with somebody, or it may resonate with many. It may create a ripple effect. It may change something in someone or someone they're associated with. There's other people who've experienced it. It's not a like for like because we're all individuals, but it's something there that they can resonate. I mean, your experience is your experience, my experience is my experience, but there's a lot of commonalities there, and we can understand and empathize and sympathize. And those are really important to get understanding of where you've been, where you are now, and where you're going next.
I agree.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. I think we both lost for words there.
I
So,
know it's a huge topic, and
mm,
I just think we could spend hours
yeah,
talking about it more, but even just those little, keep nudging people in that direction. And I try and incorporate it into some of the speaking that I do too, in one way or another. And of course, I can tailor that to the audience and, discuss that with the host and what they feel is appropriate. But it's really interesting how often creating that space allows for people then to feel safe to
absolutely.
discuss it. So I think it's really important. And I thank you for the opportunity to go down that road with this.
Oh,
It's been a
absolutely.
significant part of my life. And I think, maybe you can relate to this too. You really just wanted to leave it in the past, drop it, move on, not even think about that anymore. And I kept getting nudges and invitations to share for the purpose that I'm doing to share, because it is important to make some good of it and try and use what I've experienced for a significant part of my life to help others. And I think we're all obligated to do that to a certain degree.
I think that's really true. I think you have to acknowledge where you've been. You have to take the learnings from that. You have to make a change in your life and you have to move on. But you can always relate to it, but not go and relive that in the
Mm-hmm.
past. And I think that's the important bit, is about not stepping back, but absolutely acknowledge where you came from, because that's part of your journey. That's part of why you are where you are, and how you got there is because of your past, right? It's been the path that you've
Yes.
walked. So, really important points. So, let's look at the future. What does the future hold for you?
What I'd like to do is, of course, grow this and expand this across Canada and have magazines that have those local resources. So this one is Alberta. I'd like to have some for the different larger metro centers that are in different provinces, and really have this available to the public. It's displayed in many different places that's easily accessible, grocery stores and shopping centers and doctors' offices, banks, you name it. And so it is visible, and I want access for people. So I would really like to expand this across the country. And of course, if the idea is something people want to take into other countries, I'm very happy to help support and get them started in that. The podcast is expanding. I have so many ideas. So we are developing also some little bite-sized series for the podcast that will offer financial information, maybe, just one little tool, one exercise, or one little self-care thing, or one communication tool, those types of things. I'm excited about some of the health topics that I'm going to be bringing on. Some's going to be some pretty juicy topics. And I just think that this is such a broad audience of needs that it really gives me many opportunities to bring all kinds of experts on. And that's what's really special, is I do not feel compelled to become an expert in all these things. I'm the connector, and I've always been a connector. So this is a good fit for me. Really create that vision. That is what I want to be doing, is really helping people to see that there is a future. Doesn't matter if you're 50, 60, don't give up.
Well said, well said. And it seems to be so much there in terms of activities. And I think, like yourself, things happen because they're supposed to happen. Things are meant to be because they're meant to be. and you just kind of follow the path, and it takes you down a different road, which is kind of quite interesting. So excellent. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on to the tips part of the podcast. So let's go with 5 tips that you'd give to anyone who's under 50. Where would you like to start?
So 5 tips I would give someone who's under 50. I would like to remind them that their instincts, even if they feel immature or that there's other people much more wise than them, that that their instincts are to be trusted. And especially if you've come from a childhood there's been some trauma, and then you've made some choices that you feel guilty about or ashamed of, you do struggle to trust your instincts. So I would say follow your instincts, trust your gut, ask for help. So this is it's tough. Why is it so tough for us? And I think especially for women, we want to be seen as competent and confident, and we can take care of anything and everything. And we don't want to show a weakness. But the mindset around that can just be flipped a little bit, that you're fully competent, but maybe you just need some assistance, or you would like to spend your time and energy in a different way, or you understand it partially, but you really need to ask for some help. And how does it feel when somebody asks you and you are able to help them? You are giving those people the opportunity as well to feel their value and to understand their value. And what was a tough moment for me, I had been in a significant accident. I had 2 hands in splints and a fractured ankle, and I was trying to do all myself and not ask for help. And I had a lady say to me, how does it make you feel when you're able to help someone? And I said, oh, I just feel great. It's wonderful. Okay, well, why are you denying others that same joy, that same opportunity? And when she reframed it that way, I thought, oh, that is powerful. I am actually denying people the opportunity to help. Maybe it's not even someone I've helped in the past, but if you can reframe it that way and ask for help and not be afraid to admit, it's not that you're not showing a weakness. I could go on about that forever, obviously, and take care of yourself. So a lot of people under 50 are trying to build a career. They may also have children, young children, and they're trying to do it all. And again, prove themselves. And again, especially women tend to be the primary caregiver, the primary homemaker, and trying to build her own credibility in a career. When's their time to take care of herself? And I think what I found in those ages was your body is more resilient. It's younger, it's more forgiving. It will put up with you not feeding it properly or giving it rest and relaxation or even fun. And so you just keep pushing on until you hit a wall. And sometimes that wall is very difficult to bounce off of and to regain your health, whether it's your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, or all of those. So that would be another piece of advice that I would definitely give. And the other thing would be to connect with your future self. So this is an exercise that I'll take people through at all ages, is to remember who you were. Who is that curious, inquisitive, outspoken child, that exuberant child that you were? And why have you squelched that? Why have you allowed that to be muted in many ways? And then also let's visit your future self, this beautiful, wise, fascinating, confident woman that's waiting in the future. That's what you're going to be. What do both those people have to say to you? They're your best buddies, the only people you'll spend every moment of your entire life with. So don't let them bully you. Don't create voices for them that are critical. really make those your best friends and reach for that. The future you want to make her proud, and the younger you don't want to crush her dreams. So take moments to reconnect with them and listen to them, and don't lose that.
That's very powerful and very wise. Thank you very much for that. Uh, so, what about the three tips to anybody who is over 50? What would you say to them?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we fail to do at many ages, but especially once we're getting older, is celebrate. Have How often do you just pause and celebrate all that you have accomplished, learned, survived, overcome, grown from? It's mind-blowing. I just started a list one day and sat down and thought, okay, even in the last 2 years, what are the things I've learned? Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. And so I would highly recommend that people sit down and start just jotting down anything that they can think of, that big or small, that they have either learned or accomplished or done or survived or overcome, whatever that might be, even in the last 6 months, and then start, digging back further, or start from a young age when you feel like you entered a rat race of sorts, and just pause and go back to that space even and think, what have I learned? Where have I grown in that time? And celebrate it, because I think it's pretty common that people do what I've done. You have something that has been a dream or even just a small goal, you reach it. Okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? You keep jumping past. It's not, wait a minute. I just did this. This was something I had in my sights, in my vision for my future. Maybe it's just a little thing, even like go for a walk. I get up in the morning and tell myself I'm going to do something special for my health and my mental well-being. And that's going to be take a little walk in nature. And you get to the end of the walk, it's like, okay, now I got to do the dishes. I got to make dinner or whatever it might be. It's like, wait a minute, good for you. You made it a priority. You did it. So celebrate anything like that. I really highly recommend that. It will help you really acknowledge your competence. It will help build your confidence. And those are two of the things that I think we need reminders of, because we're fierce, we're amazing. And as women, I don't think we always give ourselves credit for that. So that would be my number one, is celebrate. And I think another one is to be, realize that you are competent. So don't give up. Don't give up. Oh, I'm 50 now. And how many of us grew up in the age where when you were reaching 50 as a woman, you were expected, okay, you now dress frumpy, you chop your hair off, you are going to be gray, you talk more like an old person, you walk like an old person, your energy should change. Don't be too flashy, don't dress too sexy, you know, uh, don't change your world, don't change your career, don't leave your marriage, you're a granny now. Like all these that we grew up with, that was what we saw. And now you might see some people in their 80s or 90s start being that way. I love that about women. They've they've changed that. You can't guess somebody's age now by how they look. They could very easily be 70 and you think they're 40. So I love that about people. Don't give up. So not only on that was more external, your present, like how you present externally, but don't give up on dreams or making changes or taking some risk and getting out there and trying something new. I think that's so important. Really don't give up, because your future self is waiting for you to become her. So, don't disappoint her. And I think it's important to also, that take care of yourself, some of the same tips that I would have given somebody younger. So, remember who you were, connect with your future self, don't give up, put you first. That feels really cringy at times, to put yourself first. Yeah, it feels kind of awkward and loaded with guilt, but do it. It's maybe a little easier as we get older because we don't have independent or dependent children. we aren't answering and caring for the same little people and the same roles. And and celebrate is my number one.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous to all of it. Thank you,
Kira.
Thank you, Deena. It's been a wonderful session. It's been a wonderful interview. And I'm going to just watch and see where you go next. So all I can say is a big, big thank you from me for being on the podcast. And we will keep connected, obviously.
Kieran, it has meant so much to be here and spend this time with you. And I just greatly appreciate your invitation. And thank you for creating a podcast like this where we can share voices to encourage other women who are in this age. And it's such a magical age.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's a gift. Thank you. You just say thank you. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. If you want to hear more from some amazing women who are over 50, who are kicking ass and making impact, then don't forget to follow us right here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Remember to subscribe, rate, comment, and share with other women through your social media. Let's spread the word across the world that you don't have to be invisible after 50. Check out our other services on www.yournotinvisibleafter50.com and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. And always remember that life doesn't end at 50. In fact, it's just beginning. But wait, we have even more to offer. Join us and tune in to our other podcast, Shamelessly Untamed, a transformative series that encourages you to embrace your true self and celebrate your uniqueness. Make sure to subscribe to Shamelessly Untamed podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Don't forget to rate, comment, and share with anyone who can benefit from its content. Explore our additional services at www.roaringahead.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. We look forward to you connecting with us. Thank you.